He had everything: mansions, luxury cars, even his own private island. But what he didn't have was someone to come home to. I met him by pure accident, and I never thought someone like me, a regular black girl from Atlanta, could change his world. But love doesn't care about money. Hey, y'all, this is my story, raw, real, and from the heart. If you believe love can heal, or if you've ever felt like you weren't enough for someone out of your league, then stick with me till the end. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because this is more than just a love story. I've always been the kind of girl who found comfort in routine. I live in Atlanta, not in some high-rise penthouse, but in a cozy little apartment with a leaky faucet and a view of nothing special. Most days, you could find me behind the counter of this small bookstore cafe tucked between two louder places no one ever really notices. And honestly, I liked it that way. I'd start my mornings with a latte in one hand and a good book in the other, listening to the rain tap against the windows when the weather turned soft. Life was simple, predictable, quiet. Then one Tuesday, cold, wet, and dragging like most weekdays, he walked in. The bell above the door jingled like always, but something about him made time pause. He was tall, sharply dressed, and had this energy about him, like he carried the weight of 100 secrets. I remember his eyes, not just the color, but the way they scanned the room like he didn't want to be seen, but needed to be known. He didn't say much at first, just ordered black coffee, no sugar, no cream, and sat in the farthest corner like he was trying to disappear. He wasn't rude, just reserved, polite but distant, the kind of man you'd assume was cold until he looked at you a second longer than necessary and something softened. I didn't think much of it. Customers like him came and went. But then he came back, again and again. It wasn't until weeks later that I found out who he really was. A billionaire, one of those men people read about in magazines. But back then, to me, he was just the quiet guy in the corner. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have imagined, was how that quiet man was about to rewrite my entire life. He kept coming back. Same time, same seat, same black coffee. There was something oddly comforting about his presence, even if we barely spoke those first few days. He'd give a small nod when I greeted him, maybe a thanks when I handed him his drink, but nothing more. Still, I noticed things. How he always wore a watch but never checked the time. How he carried a phone he never touched. How his eyes lingered on the books more than the people. He wasn't there to be seen. He was hiding, though I didn't know from what yet. One day, the shop was emptier than usual. It was just him, me, and the hum of light jazz playing in the background. I was restocking the pastry case when I accidentally knocked over a glass jar. It shattered on the floor, and I muttered a quiet curse under my breath. He looked up and, surprisingly, smiled. That was the first time I saw it, his real smile. Not polite or rehearsed, just real. "You okay?" he asked. It caught me off guard. I think I even laughed a little because his voice was deeper than I expected. "Rich? Calm? Yeah, just clumsy today," I said. "It's part of my charm." That moment broke something open. From then on, the silence between us wasn't so heavy. He started asking questions about the books I liked, the music I played, the city. Nothing too personal at first, but I could tell he was curious, not just making small talk, actually listening. I found myself looking forward to those conversations. Over time, the questions got deeper. I asked him things too: what he did for work, why he always came alone. He'd dodge most of them with a small shrug or a half smile. "Let's just say I'm between things," he once said. I didn't push. Something told me he wasn't used to people seeing him without an agenda. I wasn't trying to impress him. I was just being me. And maybe that's why he kept showing up. One day, as he was leaving, he looked right at me and said, "I like talking to you." Just 5 words, but they held so much weight. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just a customer. This was a connection, and it was growing. It took weeks before he invited me into his world. He never said it directly, just one day asked if I liked Italian food. I told him I did, assuming we were going to some little spot downtown. Instead, a black car with tinted windows picked me up outside the shop. I won't lie, part of me wanted to back out. It felt like I was stepping into something too big for me, but curiosity got the better of me. When I arrived at his home, or more like a mansion, I realized this wasn't just wealth. This was a different universe. High gates, marble floors, towering ceilings. Everything was beautiful, expensive, and cold. The kind of place that didn't feel lived in. There were staff members everywhere, maids, chefs, a driver who didn't say a word. Everyone moved around him like he was royalty, but I could see it in their eyes. Respect, not warmth. No one really knew him. Dinner was served in a dining room longer than my entire apartment. He sat across from me, watching like he was studying my reaction. I tried to act like it didn't overwhelm me, but I was way out of my depth. I think he knew that too. "This place," he finally said, glancing around, "feels too quiet most nights." There was something in his voice, not pride, loneliness. That night, I saw him differently. For the first time, I noticed the sadness in his silence. After dinner, we ended up in his library. Yes, an actual library in his house, surrounded by books he said he'd never read. He told me about his wife. She passed 3 years ago. Cancer. He didn't talk about her much, just enough for me to feel the weight of what he carried. "Everyone wants something from me," he said. "But you just talk to me like I'm human." I didn't know how to respond to that, so I didn't try to fix it. I just listened. Sometimes silence says more than words ever can. That night, he walked me to the car and opened the door himself. As I looked back at him standing alone in front of that giant empty house, I realized he had everything except someone to share it with. I don't think love happens all at once. It sneaks up on you, quietly, softly, until one day you're sitting beside someone and you realize there's no version of life that feels whole without them. That moment came for me one night when the city was wrapped in thunder and rain. He'd called, his voice low, asking if I could come over. There was something in the way he asked that made me drop everything and go. When I got there, he wasn't the polished man I was used to seeing. No suit, no carefully combed hair, just a hoodie, barefoot, sitting on the floor by the fireplace with a bottle of scotch half finished. I didn't ask questions. I just sat beside him, and for a while, we didn't say a word. The storm outside felt like it echoed everything he was holding inside. Eventually, he spoke, told me it was his wife's birthday. She would have been 38. His voice cracked when he said it, and it broke something in me too. I reached for his hand, and he didn't pull away. He looked at me like he was trying to find pieces of himself in my eyes. "I don't know how to let her go," he whispered. "I don't think you have to," I said. "You just have to let yourself live again." After that night, something shifted. He let me see the real him, not the billionaire, not the man the world admired, but the man who was still grieving, still healing, still human. And he saw me, too. Not just the girl behind the coffee counter, but the woman who chose to stay when things got messy and hard. He started doing little things, cooking with me, badly, learning about my favorite jazz records, even showing up at the bookstore just to walk me home. It wasn't about the grand gestures. It was in the way he made space for me in his world, in how he remembered the small details about my life, in how he stopped running from his pain and started facing it, with me by his side. That's when I knew. I wasn't falling for his money or the mansion or the charm. I was falling for him. And I think, quietly, he was falling too. For a while, it felt like we existed in our own little bubble. Just him and me, coffee and conversations, laughter in the kitchen, quiet mornings. But bubbles don't last forever, especially when one half of the relationship is a billionaire whose face is known around the world. The first photo leaked after we had dinner at a small rooftop restaurant. I didn't even notice the paparazzi, but they noticed me. The next day, my phone was flooded. Messages, missed calls, social media exploding. Headlines like "Mystery Black Woman Seen with Reclusive Billionaire" were everywhere. At first, I laughed it off. But then the comments came, ugly, nasty ones. People questioning who I was, why he'd be with someone like me. Some people said I was using him. Others couldn't believe someone like him would choose someone like me. He was furious, said he'd sue the blogs, shut it all down. But the damage was done, not just to our peace, but to our sense of safety. Everywhere we went, eyes followed. Whispers floated behind us. People didn't see love, they saw scandal. And the hardest part? Some of those looks came from his world, from the charity events, the elite dinners, the inner circles where women didn't look like me and love didn't look like ours. We started fighting, not because we didn't love each other, but because we didn't know how to protect that love in the open. I felt like I was constantly being pulled apart, too much for his world, not enough for my own. He tried to reassure me, told me none of it mattered, but words couldn't shield me from the weight of it all. I began questioning myself. Was I ruining his life? Was I strong enough for this? One night, after another silent dinner, I told him I needed space. He didn't try to stop me. He just looked at me with those sad eyes and said, "I'll wait for you." It broke my heart to walk away, but I had to. I needed to find my own ground again, to remember who I was outside of his shadow. I loved him deeply, but I couldn't lose myself trying to belong in a world that didn't want me in it. Time apart was painful, but necessary. I went back to my little apartment, the bookstore, the quiet mornings with coffee that didn't taste quite the same without him. At first, I cried a lot. I questioned everything. Had I made a mistake walking away? Was love supposed to be this complicated? But over time, the noise faded, and I began to hear myself again. I started writing, something I hadn't done in years. I picked up old hobbies, reconnected with friends, and slowly, piece by piece, I remembered who I was before him. Not to forget him, but to find a way to stand beside him without losing myself. He didn't reach out, not once, but I knew him well enough to understand. He was giving me the space I asked for, even if it hurt him too. Weeks turned into months, and just when I thought maybe that chapter had closed for good, he showed up. No driver, no suit, no entourage, just him, standing outside the bookstore in the rain, holding a small bouquet of daisies, my favorite. He looked nervous. I'd never seen him nervous before. "I didn't know if you'd want to see me," he said, "but I couldn't stay away any longer. I'm not here to fix you or convince you. I'm just here, hoping you'll let me be in your life again." I didn't say anything at first. I just looked at him, the man who once hid behind his wealth, now standing completely vulnerable in front of me. And I saw the change. He wasn't trying to rescue me or impress me. He was just trying to love me. We talked for hours that night about everything, the hurt, the pressure, the fear. We didn't pretend things hadn't gotten messy. But for the first time, we were truly honest with each other and with ourselves. And somewhere in the middle of all that truth, we chose each other again. Not out of desperation, but out of understanding. Love isn't perfect, and neither were we. But love that's real, it forgives, it heals, and it grows. So I let him in again, not because I needed him, but because I wanted him. And that made all the difference. People love to imagine that relationships like ours are made of magic, that some rich man sweeps you off your feet, and suddenly your whole life becomes a fairy tale. But that's not what this was. There were no glass slippers, no perfect endings wrapped in ribbon. What we had was something better. Real love, the kind built slowly, through choice, through patience, through honesty. When we got back together, things didn't just go back to how they were. We had to rebuild. That meant setting boundaries, having hard conversations, learning how to exist, not just in private, but in public too. He started pulling back from the spotlight, turning down events, limiting press, and protecting our peace. And I, for the first time, stopped apologizing for being who I was. I didn't try to blend in or shrink myself to fit into his world. I stood tall in it, black, bold, and worthy. We did simple things: Sunday breakfast in pajamas, long walks without phones, reading together in silence. No staff, no drivers, just us. He started opening up more, showing me the parts of his past that scared him, even the parts he'd hidden from himself. And I let him see my scars too, not the kind you can photograph, but the emotional ones you carry when the world tells you you're not enough. He didn't flinch. He didn't run. He once told me, "I spent years building an empire, and it never felt like home until you walked into it." That moment stayed with me, not because it was poetic, but because it was true. He wasn't saving me. I wasn't saving him. We were choosing to walk beside each other every day, even when it wasn't easy. And yes, the world still stared sometimes. There were still whispers, still judgment. But the difference now? We stopped letting that noise define us because we knew what we had. It wasn't a fantasy, it was a partnership. A love built not on wealth or rescue or fairy dust, but on truth, vulnerability, and choice. So, no, this isn't a fairy tale. This is better. This is ours. And it's real. If you've ever felt like you weren't enough, I hope this story proves you are. Love isn't about being perfect, it's about being real. If my story touched your heart, hit that like button, subscribe for more real love stories, and drop a comment because love deserves to be seen.